Self-proclaimed, unapologetically outrageous electro-pop sensation Dorian Electra is the future. And that's not a statement I make lightly. Over the past few years, they have scored notable collaborations with Charlie XCX and 100 gecs, and made waves with their debut album, Flamboyant, which was by far one of the best albums of 2019. As a gender non-conforming fantasy pop artist, Electra first started making waves in the music industry when they created a whimsical series of educational music videos for the women's lifestyle publication Refinery 29, tackling topics like the science behind the clitoris, the dark history of high heels, and a musical ode to vibrators. Their breakout single, Career Boy, and the accompanying music video was a milestone in their career that sent them on an upward trajectory. The song paints a picture of Dorian living the addictive 9-to-5 lifestyle, even garnering an erotic thrill from it. Their philosophy and gender politics are intrinsically linked to their music, as a gender-fluid performer who was assigned female at birth. "I'm not a woman dressing up as a man. It's so much more complex than that," Electra told The Guardian. "When I came across as gender fluid, I was like, that term actually really resonates with me. But the core of my being is not gendered at all. Even gender fluid is a form of identity that can put somebody in a box." Their debut album captured the sound of queer masculinity with dramatic vocal manipulation and bombastic fantasy pop production from PC music royalty like Absurdist and Dylan Brady. Dorian's gender-fluid identity and their affinity for masculinity and femininity as performances is explored in depth on the project, where they play characters in every song embodying every masculine archetype, from the business mogul to the sugar daddy, the cowboy, and the boxers and street fighters. The song Man to Man might appear on the surface as a commentary on toxic masculinity, which it definitely is, but when taking a closer look, one can identify how brilliantly Electra queers toxic masculinity by bridging the gap between homosocial and homosexual desire. The concept of homosocial desire was popularized by academic scholar and queer theory pioneer Eve Kosofsky-Sedgwick. The abstract definition of homosocial relationships is a concept that describes and defines social bonds between persons of the same sex. Frequently used in studies on men and masculinities, they're defined as a mechanism and social dynamic that explains the maintenance of hegemonic masculinity. As Sedgwick wrote in the classic study Between Men, there is a very fine line between homosocial and homosexual, stating, "To draw the homosocial back into the orbit of desire of the potentially erotic, then, is to hypothesize the potential unbrokenness of a continuum between homosocial and homosexual, a continuum whose visibility, for men in our society, is radically disrupted." This is exactly what Dorian aims for in the man-to-man music video, as can be seen in the climax scene where Dorian battles their male co-star in a boxing match, until they appear both beaten and bloodied and eventually kiss. And the way they are able to disrupt this practice in the music video by blurring those lines is brilliant. On this album, Dorian Electra channels all of the great classical composers, aristocrats, and musicians from Liberace to Louis XIV and Beethoven. The Flamboyant video shows Dorian in their best Liberace drag, and a deconstruction of the track Musical Genius will find lyrics that go, "I've got the mind of a genius and the body of a man," implying that men are rarely actual geniuses, despite the word genius being heavily gendered. Dorian told Billboard that the song was made to mock the idea of what quote-unquote cool music sounds like, and the production by Dylan Brady is all over the place. There are so many sonic peaks and valleys that it's impossible to keep up, with harpsichords, synthesizers, and explosive bass lines. And even though the song is meant to be satire of quote-unquote cool music, that's what makes it so brilliant.
Dorian Electra.
Dorian's affinity for queer theory is also a running theme on the album, as well as queer shame, tackling religious persecution on Adam and Steve, with lyrics that go, "I'm an abomination, but I'm God's creation. God made me in Adam and Steve." On Live by the Sword, the lyrics go, "If you want to live like this, you're gonna die like this. Live by the sword and you die by the sword," which invokes the idea that queer people are supposed to perform trauma in front of straight people in order to garner their respect or validation. It also brings to mind the common argument that if a queer person was hate crimed or violently accosted in public, then they brought that on themselves and they deserve what's coming to them in the eyes of society. Queer people risk physical violence every day, whether they are visibly trans or simply holding hands with a person of the same sex. People have become so desensitized to this pressing issue that this apathy has been developed towards it, and the finger is pointed at us, LGBTQ people, like we are the problem, and we caused our victimhood and downfall by appearing to be too gay in public. In a statement describing the song Guyliner, Electra wrote, "I wanted to harken back to the mid-2000s emo MySpace scene kid aesthetic, because that was a really special cultural moment that ultimately made me feel more comfortable wearing makeup myself as a gender-fluid person." Cultural theory has defined many of the male superstars from eras of glam rock to hair metal and emo as metrosexual, which was initially framed as a form of redefining commercial masculinity. But many theorists and queer academic scholars have found numerous issues with the label, even claiming that it helped bolster a new commercial image of hegemonic masculinity that prioritized the image of heterosexual men only, ostracizing women and queer people. Instead of pointing towards a new masculinity and a more sensitive and inclusive masculinity, metrosexuality reorganized homosociality to define homosexual men as different from women and heterosexual men. With Guyliner, Electra tosses all of these tropes to the side and challenges them in the style of a fun, quippy pop song. Another subtle way that Dorian subverts the typical metrosexual restriction is with the people that they surround themselves with in the video, like Hannah and Nadja from Pussy Riot. A massive issue that people found with metrosexuality was the eradication of women from the equation. And as a queer person, Dorian subverts this by surrounding themselves with strong women and queer people. Another thing that's very important to consider is over the past few years of their career, Dorian Electra has become a sex icon, even appearing in a Playboy spread earlier this year. This is a much bigger deal than people might think because of how important it is to debunk the myth that non-binary people are these asexual beings, or that we're just undesirable because of the abnormal status that's been placed on us. And this entire album is a clear indicator that Dorian Electra doesn't play by anybody's rules but their own, and they continue to evolve as an artist. Their ability to be unapologetically and unabashedly themselves and simultaneously roleplay as other people is awe-inspiring, trailblazing, and, most importantly, sexy. I cannot wait to see what they come out with next.